So I will speak about enumeration and uniform random generation of Young tableau with walls. Alors Young tableau, you know the structure. It's some tableau with numbers from 1 to n, which are constrained to be increasing by line, by row. It could have different shapes. And here we add some walls that you see in red, in which between two walls you don't have anymore the constraint that the numbers should be increasing. It could or not be increasing. This is Young tableau with walls. So the question is in which way to generate the objects. So it's a joint work with Michael Wallner from the TU Wien and my colleague Philippe Marchal from the mathematical lab at the University of Paris North. And to do this type of enumeration of such objects, we created a new method that we call the density method, which will be related to polyhedra, polytopes, volume of polytopes, some kind of geometrical point of view to do some enumeration. So it was quite a new paradigm, I would say. And we applied this to analyze the random surface of big Young tableau. So if you take a Young tableau of very, very big size, it could be some different shapes. It could be, for example, some triangular Young tableau. The numbers, you can see them as some altitude. So you get a landscape. And this is a landscape of a Young tableau here. And question, what is the typical landscape? What are the limit laws around the fluctuations and so on? And to analyze the behavior of such tableau at the corner and so on, we used the density method. So I will for sure explain all of this later. And during the enumeration process of such tableau, we will encounter a lot of hypergeometric functions, definite functions. And yesterday I got a question by some people asking why we care for definite functions and so on. And I wanted just to add 2 slides related to this. So now I can try to do the switch. So why we care for definite functions? So the nice word of definite functions. So definite functions, first definition, we saw it in the talk by Sergey and some other talks also. They are functions which are satisfying a linear differential equation with coefficients of finite order, with coefficients which are polynomials in the variable. You have even a generalization of this in several variables. Then you have a system of differential equation in which for each line in your system, you have just the derivation with respect to one of the variable, only one variable at the time. So this is definite function. You have a dual point of view, which is if you consider the recurrences on the coefficients of the Taylor expansion of your function. And then this is a holonomy theory, so it could be different operators than just the differential operator. And the fact is that many functions, for sure, almost all the special functions in physics are definite. So one of the most sold books in the history of science is this Handbook of Mathematical Functions by Abramovitz and Stegun, for sure because of a lot of people working in engineering and so on are also using this type of books. And more generally, you have a lot of books related to computation of integrals, Mellin transform, series, and so on. Nowadays, you even have some electronic form of this, which were kind of made more secure by doing some kind of, let's say, to merge this with tools like we saw Coq in the during the first day to prove rigorously that the identities are correct. So there is an interplay between this type of mathematics and special functions. This is work which is partially done at NIST in collaboration with people from everywhere in the world. For sure, you have a lot of stuff going a little bit more to the direction of Q analogs, special functions in partition theory, and even modular forms of weight k satisfies definite equations of order k plus 1. So this is in the book by Don Zagier, the 1, 2, 3 of modular form. For example, you can find the proof of this. I think that it goes back probably to Ramanujan, who at least did use this. Then you have also the fact that it's the right place, the right paradigm to prove identity. And you have this book, A equals B, by Petkovtsky, Wulff, and Zalberger, in which way you can prove that A equals B. I will show example on the next slides. And for whenever you have definite functions, yes, you are happy, you can prove. You can use computer algebra to prove this. So you have different books, like the books by Covers and Pauley, which are also showing this. In combinatorics, you have a lot of examples of definite functions. So the notion was even developed by Stanley and Doron Zalberger almost 30, 40 years ago, no? And since I forgot the number, but something like perhaps some years ago, 70% of the sequences in the Sloan were definite. No, I think it is less because people did a lot of strange stuff from number theory and so on, which are sometimes more exotic and not definite. But so a huge percentage of integer sequences are definite. And for sure, you have also a lot of examples of this in the book by Flageolet and Sedgwick, Analytic Combinatorics, where almost by design, whenever you have some recursive combinatorial structures, it leads you to some functional equations or some explicit functions which are in fact finite. And so in physics, computer science, probability theory, engineering physics, everywhere, in fact, people are handling, perhaps sometimes without even to be aware of it, definite functions. And why it is a good world to prove identities and so on. So all of this, in fact, is related to the holonomic definite world. So if you want to prove identities like sum of binomials, well, you can use closure properties. You find a recurrence for the inner first binomial, then for the product, you have a closure property, you get a recurrence for the product, then for the sum, then the double sum. You get a recurrence for the guy on the other side. And then you can check, oh, for example, oh, it is the same recurrence. You just have to check the initial conditions, and then you get a proof that A equals B. Okay? And what I said for a recurrence, you can do it, for example, for this identity of product of Bessel function. You get a differential equation for the Bessel function, then for the product, and so on. You get a differential equation for the log here. Oh, it is the same differential equation. You check initial condition, you get a proof that A equals B. So sometimes it won't be exactly the same differential equation or recurrence, but you can factorize and check if then if you get at the end something which is matching. So you can apply this idea to formulas computing stuff related to Chebyshev polynomials, to Q analogs. It's also one way to get very fast and efficient evaluation of many constants, like the Polite zeta values. You can get n digits, like we saw in the talk yesterday, which are guaranteed to be exact in a very efficient time. And it was also used, this paradigm of definite functions, to prove that zeta of 3 is not rational, for example. And also you can do asymptotics. Whenever you have a differential equation, you have some tools to go automatically from the differential equation to the asymptotics. You have to get the dominant singularities, you do a local expansion, and you get stuff with as many terms as you wish. Here I have to mention that there are still some nice open problems related to this. So this, in full generality, you can do it numerically for the constant, for example, the gamma of the minus 1 over 3, for the kind of linear constant in your asymptotics, which is related to the Stokes coefficient that we had in the monodromy matrix. The entries of the matrix are related to this constant here. And this, in full generality, it's not known right now if we can prove that it will be exactly minus 1 over 3 gamma of 2/3. You can get as many digits as you want, but to prove that it is exactly this, it's not yet known to be decidable. In this case, it is. In this case, it's possible to prove it, but in full generality, it's still open. And the exact link between this and so there are periods, but it's not clear first that all periods would appear as coefficients here. What is exactly the different intersections of the sets, it's not clear. You have some recent work by Rivoal, Joris van der Hoeven, Stefan Fischler on these issues, which are quite interesting, but still open problem here. And also we saw some pullback of hypergeometric function. It's also completely definite, and this also you can prove with definite stuff. So it was just a kind of very initial stuff to answer to the question why you care for definiteness and why I will be happy to have definite stuff later in my talk. So now I go back to the other main talk. So the second stuff which is exciting me, and perhaps not a lot of people in the room, is uniform random generation. So whenever you have some combinatorial structure, you may want to generate a big tree or graph or maps of size 1000 to check some properties on it, to do some random simulation and so on. So for sure, for a lot of exotic combinatorial structure, they just have ad hoc methods. Okay. However, you have a few generic principles which are working for full classes of combinatorial objects. For example, you could use some bijections with other combinatorial objects. You could, sometimes when you have some constraint on your object, you do some rejection stuff. So you generate stuff which possibly don't satisfy the constraint until you get one which is satisfying the constraint. It may sound a little bit silly and not efficient, but with some mathematics behind, you can tune this to decrease the number of rejections, and it could be quite efficient at the end. It could be, in fact, linear time. We had quite hidden in the talk by Nicolas Baer on the first day. There was some Remy trees mentioned, and it's in fact leading to a linear time to generate binary trees. Or you could have some system of gray code and so on. So some kind of semi-generic methods could work. Then you have other type of approaches, which are Markov chain for Monte Carlo algorithms. For example, if you consider, like we saw in the talk by Jim Prop, tilings by dimers or trimers or tribones and so on. You can use this type of approaches. So, for example, like the algorithm coupling from the past, which is leading to uniform random generation. Then you have another approach, which is the so-called recursive methods, in which you will use some generating functions, so counting stuff, and you check a little bit when you add atoms in your combinatorial objects, what is the number of possible ways to do the right proportion to follow the probabilities to get uniformity at the end. So this is something which was developed in this book by Wilf and Niran Wyss many years ago, and which was later extended to the full class of combinatorial structures by Flageolet, Zimmermann, Van Cutsem, and it's even available now in computer algebra softwares like Maple, Sage, and so on. You have also other approaches which are with generating trees, in which you step by step you build your objects. It's also related to generating functions. And then a few years ago, already 20 years ago, there was a new paradigm for uniform random generation, which was created by Philippe Duchamp, Philippe Flageolet, Gilles Schaeffer, and Guy Louchard, which was the idea of the Boltzmann method. So you will use, again, a generating function, but with something which was completely strange in those times. Well, it was used in physics, but not exactly to do some uniform random generation, which was to give a Boltzmann weight to your function. So you compute your function, your generating function f of z, where the coefficient would be the number of objects of size n, at a given value of z, 0.3331, you will compute, so that you maximize the probability that you will generate an object of size n. So, and you have some nice equations behind it, and the full theory is working. And it was a big change of paradigm, because before it was possible to generate objects of size a few hundreds, 1,000, and with this approach, suddenly, with the same computers, you can generate objects of size 1 billion. So it was really a very nice mathematical idea, which was just using everything which was available already and developed with analytic combinatorics, generating functions, symbolic methods by Flageolet. And now I will present today another approach, which will be the density method. Okay, so the objects that I want to enumerate, like we saw previously, are Young tableaux with local decreases. More generally, it could be any posets. But let's consider this one. So here you see that whenever I have a red stuff, so it is increasing by line and column, but when I have a red border, it could decrease or not. Here, for example, it is increasing, and between these two cells, it is decreasing. So when I have a wall, you don't see what is behind the wall. You can do whatever you want. Okay. Alors, is it some nice objects? Well, what is quite funny is that for sure, if you have no walls, what is the number of such tableaus? If I have a strip here, 2 pi n, I can put values what I want anywhere. I have just a permutation, so it's 2n factorial. If what? No, okay, sorry. So if I have if I have walls everywhere here, if I have walls everywhere, all the cells are independent. I can permute the values as I want. Then I have 2n factorial. For sure, if I don't have walls, then I have some constraint. It has to be increasing by line and by column. Okay, and here, well, you just it's Young tableau of height 2, which are well known to be in bijections with Catalan numbers. But let's go on if we have some other nice formulas. So if I put some horizontal walls everywhere, so it is just increasing by line. Okay, so then what happens? What will be the formula? So I have all the permutations, but in each line I order them. So I divide by 2n, so it's nice. If I put walls just like this, I have again some nice formula. Less easy to guess, but okay. And if I put some walls everywhere, I have again something which is hypergeometric. And if I put k vertical walls anywhere, and I sum all the possibilities of such a tableau, I get a formula which is again hypergeometric, which is this formula. Okay. So in which way to prove, for example, the hardest one is the last one. So in which way to prove such a stuff? So you can do bijections. It was one of the tools that I was mentioning. Here you can make first a bijection between such tableau and lattice path from 0 to 0 with jump +1 and -1. So it's called big bridges, which will be of length 2n and which will have k marked steps in red. Okay, what is exactly the construction? So you follow the cells 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, and if it is a cell which is to the right, you do a down jump. If it is to the left, you do up. So 1 down, 2 up, 3 up, 4 up, 5 down, 6 down, 7 down, 8 up, 9 up, 10 up, so, and whenever you have the second rule. Whenever you have a down step which is on the right, you put it in red. Okay, so it's clearly in bijection. So the number of such tableaux should be this number of paths. Can we count this number of paths? So here, in fact, you can relate this enumeration to the property which is called the Jungfehler property, which is that the number of Dicke bridges, walks from 0 to 0 with plus and minus 1 jumps, with exactly I down step is in fact independent of I. So it's quite surprising. It's, you can prove it by some kind of rotation lemma, cyclic lemma. And therefore, it is exactly the same number than the one which has no steps below 0. And for example, the Catalan numbers, which are from 0 to 0 and always positive, therefore have the same enumeration. Therefore, all of them are counting by the Catalan number. Okay, and if you apply this to the previous, then you get that V and K is just this sum, which is leading to this formula. So this is one way to prove this with bijections and links to enumeration of surface paths. This is your phone. We know why it was making noise during the full week.
No, his computer is there. No, but his computer is there precisely. Elementary, dear Watson.
I don't know. But I guess that the noise could be our cell phones. Let's say. I don't want to blame nobody. So this phenomenon is nice. I can give another proof of this formula, which is okay. So now instead of having just the number of tableaux of size n, I will make a kind of bivariate enumeration with counting also the number of rows at the same time, so V and K, and I want the corresponding polynomial. And I claim that this is this formula. For sure, it is implying the previous formula also. And here, in which way to prove such a formula? Well, you see almost a kind of combinatorial meaning in this formula. You should have something which is counting by Catalan number, and then you have something that you take or not n plus 1 time. And it's not allowed to take it n plus 1 time exactly. So this is what the formula is saying. So can we prove it? Can we see this formula on the objects directly? Yes, again with bijections. So what you can do when you have such a tableau, you can sort the line. Okay, so all the stuff which are after a red wall, you put it in red. So 1, 2, 8, 9, 13, you put it in red. Okay, then you sort each line in increasing order. It becomes this tableau. This is the first transformation. Okay, so then you can create from it a tree by a depth first search reading. And so all the nodes which are on the left, they will be internal nodes. All the nodes on the right, they will be leaf, external nodes. So if you do this stuff, you get this tree. Okay, and then you can do a last transformation on this tree. So whenever, so you start from the bottom left, and whenever you cross some red internal node, you push it to the bottom, and you swap. So why? Because it is working, let's say. So here, let's take this red node here. I will push it. I push it, and I swap. If you see it, I push it, and I swap to the left and right subtrees. Okay, and you do this everywhere. And if you do this, you get this tree. What is this tree? At the end, you always get a binary tree in which any of the some of the n+1 leaves are marked by a red cross, but not all of them, because, well, this one was kind of some extra one, so this one could, there is always one which is not marked. So this is explaining the okay, so it was just some kind of preliminary easy cases for which you get hypergeometric formula and you can prove it with bijections. En passant, you see that this formula is proving that your enumeration is divisible by divisible, I'm not sure, by a Catalan number, and also it's divisible by this Catalan k-1, but we don't have a combinatorial, so it's proven here, but we don't have a combinatorial explanation of it. Having a combinatorial explanation means that in this object, somewhere we should see an object of size k-1, which is a tree or something like this. I'm not clear. Okay, so kind of open bijective problem. Okay, so it was some easy hypergeometric cases. You can have more. You can have more. You could have tableaus in which you have some walls like this at some given spaces, and then you can get a kind of formula which is a type of hook length formula. You see all this big product and quotients of binomials, and for whatever the distance between the walls are, okay, you get this type of hypergeometric formula. And with Gérard yesterday we were saying, oh, but by the way, this type of formula that we saw in the talk by Maxime, is it possible to give a kind of hook length formula proof of it? So a classical hook length formula won't work because you have a kind of continuity in the products which is not matching exactly the formulas here, which are very sparse. You don't have 15, 14, blah, blah, blah. You have some big holes. However, playing with such variants of tableau, it may be the case. I tried, I did not succeed yet, but perhaps it could be one explanation for the integrality of these quantities. It's still, as far as I know, it is still an open problem to it is still an open problem to have a combinatorial explanation of why it is a nice combinatorial explanation of why it is some integers. For sure, you have some proofs. So you have this Landau criterion, which is saying that, okay, you take the integer part, you replace n by x, you replace factorial by integer part, you replace the division by a minus, and then if this quantity is positive, then it is the sequence is a sequence of integer numbers. But the combinatorial proof of this is still open, perhaps with this type of tableau. Okay, so let's consider a third variant of tableau to show a little bit to what type of strange phenomenon they can lead. So before I had some walls everywhere and just a strip at the bottom which was connected. Now I have just walls at the very last line. So I have some holes, if you want, in each not line, row of size 2. Okay. And these objects, in fact, they are in bijections with different objects which are important in computer science, which are compacted trees, which are some variant of directed acidic graphs. And they are also related to some stuff in bioinformatics, phylogenetic networks. And they are also bijections with some other objects, which will be words in which the letters are appearing with some constraint of order between them. Okay. So these objects were already existing, okay? And if you try to do the enumeration of them, you don't have any nice closed form formula. You have some recurrences, but however, you can do the asymptotic of it. And the asymptotic, as you can see, is very unusual in combinatorics. What is usual in combinatorics. You could have some kind of n factorial floating around. Okay, you have the radius of convergence, the inverse of the radius of convergence to the n, classical. You have the so-called what people in physics call the critical exponent. Here it is -2/3. But here in the middle, you have this phenomenon of stretch exponential, which is kind of indicating that the nature of the dominant singularities of the functions are quite irregular, and even, in fact, an infinite number of singularities. And not only this, but you see that the quantities which are appearing in this stretch exponential, it's one constant times blah, 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 and to the 1. And the constant, it's precisely the largest root of the Airy function, the largest negative root, the largest root, yes, of the Airy function of the first kind. Okay, so and this is typical of a full class of recurrences which are a little bit of this type, which is on the last line, which were considered by Andrew L.V. Price, Wen-Jie Fang, and Michel Wallner, in which, with a kind of lattice-price point of view, with some constraints which are depending on the time and altitude, you could have, you get the asymptotic behavior of such walks by some lower bounding and upper bounding. And this is why you get the asymptotics with a big theta here. We don't know exactly what is the mutative constant. For this class of recurrences, it's still widely open to get the exact mutative constant, but we have the exact asymptotic first term. Okay, and you see, so it leads to something which are quite unusual, and you have possibly some other objects like this in combinatorics which begins to, the asymptotics is still open, but it may be the case that some variants of self-avoiding walks and so on could exhibit this type of phenomenon, but it's far away to be rigorously proven and so on. Okay, so here it was different ways, bijections, recurrences, and so on to do some enumeration on asymptotics. Now I want to present the methods which is generic, which will work for any poset. And this is the so-called density methods, which could be called the polytope density methods. So it has far origins in poset theory. It was used, for example, by some earlier versions of this were used by Stanley in early 80s to prove some log concavity properties of sequences related to volume of polytopes. It has also some roots in number theory. We will see on the next slides with some ideas due to Calabi, Zagier, and so on. It was applied in some simple cases to square unit tableau, so no walls and square form, by Yuri Baryshnikov, and some variants of alternating permutations by Stanley. And then it was generalized a few years ago by my colleague Michel Wallner and Philippe Marchal and myself, and also with the addition of this idea of random generation. So in which way it is working? First, the link with number theory, and so there is a lot of work on polyzeta values and so on, so values of the function on integers and so on. And there is this nice proof, which is almost a geometric proof, which is, okay, so you consider the theta function, you take the sum over the inverse of the odd numbers, okay? So S of S. S of 2, this is this quantity, okay? And can you get a closed form for this? Many possible ways with cotangent function and so on, but here let's do something which is more geometric. So this quantity, you can rewrite it as an integral. If you take the primitive of this, you get this quantity. The sum here, there, it's this integral of rational function. Okay, so it's a period. So integral over a semi-algebraic set of a rational function. And here you can do a change of variable. you do the following change of variable. So this was the idea, I think, by Calabi, and it was also popularized by Zagier. And there is a generalization in higher dimension of this also due to Calabi, and which is in some article by Noam Elkis. Okay, but in this case, if you do this change of variable, the square here becomes this triangle. Okay, and it happens, miracle, or good choice of change of variable for this, that this quantity is exactly 1 then with the change of variable. Then what you get is that this sum is just the volume of the triangle, the area of the triangle. And the triangle, okay, it's just the half the square pi over 2. And therefore, okay, this is the answer. You can generalize this in higher dimension, and you even get a link with alternating permutations and so on. And for sure, I think it was one of the motivation by Kontsevich and Zagier to introduce a class of periods. It leads to very exciting questions. For example, what you could call the notion of dimension of a number, which will be the minimal number of nested integrals that you need to define some famous number. Okay? And also it is related to the Hilbert problem, concurrence of polytopes, in which way you can cut those domains to prove that A equals B. And some aspects of this in higher dimensions are still open. Okay, so now let's explain in which way to use something which is, I would say, a late evolution of this idea to Ur enumeration. So when we have such a tableau with walls, what we will do, if you try brute force, it won't work. It will be too slow. And you get just 2 or 3 coefficients. But I claim that it is given by such a recurrence. Okay? And if you do this, it's very easy to compute, and you will get these numbers. And you see they grow very, very fast. If you try brute force, you will never be able even to stock this in memory. There's more possibilities. So you need recurrence to reach this status. So where is it coming from? And you can also keep in mind the shape of the recurrence, a polynomial which is integral over some polytope of some polynomials times the previous polynomial. It will be the class of recurrences which is behind this method. Okay, so where is it coming from? So the idea is that instead of generating a table like this, okay, I start by adding a kind of minimal cell to the bottom, and then instead of generating integers, I will generate numbers between 0 and 1. And those numbers, they satisfy some constraint in each blocks. They are increasing by line and by column. So the type of constraints that I have in each blocks, they are given here. Okay. So what you do to generate this? Well, you first generate this number at random between 0 and 1, then this one smaller than z, then you generate a number y which is between x and y. You generate a number w which is larger than z, smaller than 1. Here you generate a number which is larger than 0, and smaller than y. Here between r and z, and y is between z and b. Okay, so you have a lot of constraints like this, which are given, in fact, by this integral. The integral that I have here is exactly saying that all my values were chosen according to the ordering constraints. Okay? And if you do this in some naive way, you won't get something which is uniform. You have to condition by the probability of the successive blocks. And this is what I do here. By doing it by blocks, you correct exactly the probabilities to get uniformity. And so you have the algorithm. You pre-compute the polynomials, which are the integral over those polytopes. Then you generate your values with the right densities, the polytope, and then you go on until the last block. And the proof that it is uniform is in fact the following, due to the following formula. So you have a product of conditional probabilities, and those conditional probabilities, in fact, it will be a telescopic product. You see that at each step, you have some quantities which is cancelling with the previous steps. And that at the end, what remains is just the extremal terms, okay? And the product of the characteristic function of each blocks, each subpolytope, which is a full polytope. So at the end, you get that your algorithm is generating tuples of real values with a density which is given by this. Okay. Then you know that the integral of a density is 1. So I take the integral of this density and it is equals to 1. Therefore, the integral of this is just the volume of the polytope, is equals to this quantity. And then the integral of okay. So this is the first property. The volume of the polytope is given by this integral. And then what is the volume of this polytope? You can say that what is the probability to generate such an object? This is, if I take a dot in the space, what is the probability that it is in the right polytope? Well, it is the size of the polytope divided by all the number of possible permutations. Therefore, the number of tableaux, this is just the factorial of the number of guys times the volume of the polytope. So there is this interplay between random generation and enumeration. You have something which is allowing to do some enumeration and generation in quadratic time with this approach. Okay, so it's possible to apply this to different shapes. For example, if you consider some shapes which are like this, that we call Jenga shapes because this came with wooden sticks and so on, you get at the end a full family. You just apply the method, you get you do the stuff, and you get a full family of hypergeometric function, and in fact of sum of hypergeometric functions, which is of this type. If you play with other shapes, you can play with Q shapes and so on. You get also stuff which are nice hypergeometric functions. And I want to end with a family of examples in which there is still one open problem. So now you consider, again, Young tableau with walls, but only which are made of blocks 2 by 2 that you repeat. So you put some walls whenever you want in this block, and you repeat it. And then you fill it with a constraint to what type of objects are contained by this, and what is the asymptotic, and so on. So in fact, it appears that almost all of them are hypergeometric, and you get a lot of hypergeometric examples that you can prove with the density method, for example, or in some cases directly, with some recursive decomposition. So you see sums of hypergeometric or hypergeometric functions. And yes, some cases are even algebraic. Those cases are hypergeometric algebraic, or some of hypergeometric algebraic cases. And you have 3 cases, which are, we had this word in some previous talk, sporadic cases, more exceptional ones, which are those shapes, which have a little bit a flavor of zigzag permutation. And in fact, the first case, you see, if you repeat this case, so you have one example on the side of such a tableau. It's contained by these funny generating functions, you see, with some trigonometric function. It's not at all easy to guess it or to see why at first. But in fact, it's related to some work of Leonhard Karlitz, which is one of the main contributor in combinatorics by the number of articles. And he had a look on the generalization of all problem which was considered 1 century ago of zigzag permutation. You know, it's leading to the tangent number relation with 2 over pi and so on. There is a nice history behind this. But he considered permutations which are by block increasing for a given length, then decreasing, increasing, decreasing, and so on with some given length. And depending on this, depending on the length of these increasing, decreasing blocks, he found the generating functions, which are involving some variants of Koch function and so on, which are those functions. So in this case, it is this. And you can, recycling this approach, you can prove that the cases, like the first cases, are in this shape. The 2 cases which are open are Z2 and Z3. Here, these 2 shapes. We don't know what they are. Here I have to mention that this case here, the Koch one, is not definite. It is differentially algebraic. It's a polynomial equation in the derivative and the variable, the derivative of the function and the variable. For the last 2 cases, we don't know if they are if it is definite or not. So for people who want to give it a try, they can try. Okay, so in conclusion, there is this full class of posets which is now possible to enumerate with this density method. So it's an approach which is completely different than all the previous approaches using some hook lengths and so on. And what is more, even you won't be able to, as far as we know, there is no other way to enumerate some of the families that we showed than the density method. So it's efficient from a computer algebra point of view. It was applied to the landscape of Young tableaux, the asymptotic of this. And it is leading to some interesting questions of what are the sequences which could be obtained by such shapes? Is it the case that they are, when is it the case that they are definite, the algebraic? Also, the asymptotics are strange. We get some new type of recurrences leading to some new type of asymptotics. And what is exactly the full class of asymptotics which is possible to get? It is still open. So that's all, and thank you.
Thank you very much for lively talk. You have the question, please.
Yes.
So you consider mainly this is a rectangular salon, but if you consider staircase, do you consider?
Yeah. For example, this one here is a staircase. It's a staircase case. Quickly I passed, but there was, for example, some screw shapes here and so on. You can do a lot of variants. You see here you have different shapes. So you just have to follow the building blocks and so on. One important step in my work here is that there is a kind of periodicity of the pattern to have the recurrence. You repeat a pattern so that you have the recurrence.
Yeah, but from one side, so you have just a hook formula for computing without walls. And then with walls, you have just, I believe, some modification of.
Yes, the walls in general are kind of breaking very quickly all the hook length stuff. For sure, if your shape is if there is a full wall somewhere, then you have independence of the stuff, and then you can do a product of the two shapes. So the problem is only difficult if you have a kind of infinite connected component with stuff which are connected together. So a staircase could be done and so on.
Yeah, but for example, for staircase, you can also have another bijections with some other objects. So what it would be correspond to? Do you know something that? If you have some object with bijection to this numeration, and then you put walls, so to what it corresponds to?
It's a kind of infinite games, but I can answer a little bit. In fact, for staircase stuff, and even some variant of staircase in which, so staircase will be Young tableaux, which are like this. Okay, and we did something which is a little bit more complicated than this, which is that here, each of these stuff here will be a given shape. For example, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 3, and you repeat this shape. So it's a kind of periodic staircase. So it's more general than staircase. And you have a lot of bijections. You have some bijection of these objects with, more precisely, you have bijections with some parameters in these objects, with some stuff which are contained by what is called Polya urns. Trees and so on. So in one of the articles that I was mentioning, we are using this, in fact. We first prove some asymptotics using this stuff to get some insights on the tableau. But to put walls, you have so many possibilities, so many different families. Here I did only the shapes 2 by 2. If you do 3 by 3, it's very huge. I would say it's open. If you have some PhD students or master students, they can play for years with this.
And another question, so if to consider semi-standard tableau, so is there also some computation? I can consider also semi-standard with the walls.
Okay, I didn't, but it's natural objects to consider also, yes. Yeah. For sure, natural question, is it the case that some of this will be basis and some representation algebra of something? Not clear. Just focus on the enumeration and asymptotics, but yes, it's open.
Thank you.
Please.
Are there connections with the representation theory of symmetric groups? Some applications to it? Or?
In one sense, it was just what I said, that it's natural to expect it, because when there is no walls, there is a lot of such links. I don't know. One stuff which could say yes is that all the very nice formula with the binomial flavor at the beginning. It's very combinatorial. So this may suggest that those ones could be suitable. I would say that the hypergeometric ones are the ones which smells perhaps better for representation theory and so on. But I will be much happier if some non-hypergeometric cases have appear in some natural algebra, or this will be even funnier. Gérard?
Do you have a link with this sort of tableau with repeated pattern and grammars?
Not really. All these objects, those ones, they are not, when you fill them with the values, you get some asymptotics which are faster. You see the n factorial here. It's faster than algebraic in one sense. And context-free grammar will be algebraic. But you may say, but during your talk you said that you had some hypergeometric functions which were algebraic. Yes, but because if you divide by the n factorial here, if you do one Borel transform, then you get algebraic objects and so on. But in one sense, the objects here are will be grammars labeled with 1 to n, so it's kind of labeled grammars.
Attributed grammars.
Attributed grammars, by Knuth, it's even something else. They are not labeled. You add one parameter which is additive, and it's still in the world of algebraic stuff, attributed grammars. Here it will be more labeled grammars.
Okay.
Yes. No more question? No, thank you.